it's time to mix some sourdough. And we did this mise en place yesterday. Recipe for hand mixed sourdough is up on the system, so you'll be able to do that. But you can see I've got some whole wheat flour, I've got some flour, or I've got all-purpose flour in here because I didn't have bread flour at the time. I've also got my sour that I fed yesterday, and the sour has about a spoonful of my original sour, plus I fed it with some water and flour, so it reaches 4.6 ounces. That little formula for that sourdough feed is on your recipe, so don't worry, it's there. I think it's 2.5 ounces of flour to 2 ounces of water, plus a spoonful of your original sour mother, as they call it. That's been growing overnight, and as you can see, it's all bubbly, it's really ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and get ready to mix. I'm going to keep my salt off on the side because we're going to do a special method of mixing on this that is going to eliminate the salt for the time being. First, I'm going to take my water. My water is at room temperature, and I'm going to put that in with my sour, and I am just going to stir it around. I want to get my sour kind of broken up in the water and kind of just really started hydrating. I'm just feeling around down there, trying to make sure it's nice and hydrated, nice and broken up. I want it to get well distributed, so I don't want to just throw it in to the bowl. Now, we're going to do a special type of mixing on this. It's called autolyse. And an autolyse is where we take the liquid, and in this case also the sour. We're going to add that to our flour. We're going to get everything out of here as much as we can. We want all that good stuff, all that good sour. That sour is our leavener. We notice we have no yeast in this recipe. There's no commercial yeast at all. Real sourdough is only leavened with the natural sour that we're using. Now I'm going to bring this together gently here until the dough starts to form a cohesive mass. So I'm going to mix this for maybe 5 minutes or so by hand. And what we're going to do, the word autolyse is a French word, but basically it's a resting period in the middle of mixing. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be getting this mixed, and then we're going to let the dough sit and rest. And what that does is it allows the dough to become more hydrated. The water that's in this mixture will have a chance to absorb into the flour more, and it will have a chance, just have more time to do that. Normally when you mix dough, you'll find that your if you looked at the flour at a microscopic level, it has absorbed some of the water, but it hasn't fully absorbed the water yet. Autolyse allows that flour more time to get more fully absorbed into the water, to get more fully absorbed into the flour. And you'll notice that I have my salt here off to the side. I have not added my salt yet. The reason for that is because I want to make sure that this yeast has a chance to grow without salt being present. If you think of salt as being like, it's a limiting factor. What it does is it limits how much the yeast grows and how fast it grows. It's sort of like a supervisor. It's like if you send a bunch of children out into a playground and you just let them play, and you don't have any boundaries or rules, they're just going to go wild, right? They're just going to run around and get crazy and have fun because there's no rules. But if before you send them out to play, you set down some boundaries. You say, don't go here, don't go there. I want you to stay within sight. I want to make sure I can see you at all times. That means that the kids have some boundaries, and they will usually follow those boundaries, usually. In the case of salt, what that's doing for yeast, salt is like the parent and yeast is like the children. And given no limits and no restrictions, the yeast will just go crazy and grow. The salt puts a boundary up. So what's basically happening then is you've got the yeast has a chance to grow unfettered, without any limits, without any rules. And that's kind of a good thing for the yeast. It has a chance to get a head start. All right, so I've got this mix so it's kind of forming a cohesive ball of dough. We're going to go ahead and let this sit. Just cover it. And we're going to go ahead and let it autolyse for about 15 minutes. And that's going to let this dough more thoroughly hydrate. After the autolyse, then we're going to add the salt. When we add the salt, that will suddenly impose the rules and restrictions on the yeast, and the yeast will grow at a more moderate rate. All right, we're back. Now, after the autolyse, as I say, it's just a resting period to let the dough hydrate. And this dough has had a chance for now 15 minutes to hydrate. I'm going to go ahead and scrape it down, turn it out of the bowl. Get all of it out of there. And what you'll notice after autolyse is the dough is really, it's gotten more elastic. It's really changed. And that's because it's had a chance to more fully hydrate, and it just behaves different. And that's one of the real benefits of doing an autolyse. It really does make the dough much more easy to handle. Yes, it's a little sticky, but it doesn't really stick to my hands. I'm going to go ahead and take the salt now, and I'm going to go ahead and spread the salt on the dough. And I am just going to start working that salt into the dough. Just kind of giving it a pull and just working it in. Now, one trick to dough that's a little on the sticky side is if you don't handle it for very long, it won't stick to you nearly as much. So you just kind of have to be real nimble. So as I knead this dough, I can feel the salt is in there. I can feel the graininess of it. But it will absorb into the dough, become part of it, because there's enough hydration in this dough to get that salt to dissolve in. Now you'll also notice I'm not using any flour on the bench. Using flour would be a mistake, because what that'll do is it will cause the dough to get stiffer and drier, and we don't want that. We want the dough to come out as the recipe intended, which has good moisture and that the dough is not too stiff. And I know it may be comforting to use some extra flour, but all you end up with is a tight loaf with a real tight crumb and, you know, a texture that you're just not as happy with as you would be if you just left that flour out. And you'll notice if I'm working with it fairly quickly on the bench here, it's not sticking that badly. I'm flipping it over and giving it a good push with the heel of my hand as I work. Really try in many ways to get the job done as efficiently as I can. This is essentially what happens in a mixer when the dough hook is going around and around in the bowl and it's mixing the dough. It's doing exactly what my hands are doing, just a lot faster. Again, if I work quickly, the amount of sticking is to a minimum. It does get sticky. If I hold on to it, yeah, sure, it sticks to me. But if I don't hold on to it very long, it doesn't stick to me much. And remember, keep your scraper nearby. If it does start to stick for any reason, then it's time to use the scraper to help get it off the surface. But again, if you pull it up quickly, it doesn't leave any residue behind. Generally, the gluten doesn't want to stick to you. It wants to stick to itself. Now, once the dough has been mixed thoroughly enough where you feel like you're getting a nice, smooth, elastic texture, then it's time to allow the dough to bulk ferment. We can do that in a bowl. We can do it on the bench here if you like, either way. But we'll see that this dough is starting to get a nice, smooth texture to it. Now, the type of kneading I've done before, where I slap and fold, that works well too. You can do that with this dough. It works just fine. But the important thing in the end is to develop good gluten. And what we've got here is a nice rounded ball of dough, really good, really seems to be really good start on gluten development. I'm going to go ahead and put it in a bowl. And this is going to rest for about 30 minutes. Recipe says let it go in 60 minutes and then give it a fold. Because I've hand mixed it, I'm going to go 30 minutes and then I'm going to fold it. Then I'm going to go 30 more and let it fold, do another fold. And then I'm going to do 30 more and then a fold and then do 30 more. So it'll be 4 sets of 30 minutes, 3 folds. That will give enough extra strength to the dough through the folding that I think will get some good results. And the reason why is because that extra fold is, the extra 2 folds are really to get more strength. Strength that I didn't put in it when I first kneaded the dough. So we can compensate for some kneading by doing extra folds. And folds will just help make the dough stronger, help it retain air better, and help you get, in the end, better volume and better shape of your loaf. Everything will be better. Everything improves when the dough is stronger. So we're going to let this go for 30 minutes. Give it a cover with some plastic. I'll set a timer for 30 minutes, come back, and we'll go ahead and do the first fold. Okay, it's time for our first fold. With this type of dough, anytime you're working with dough that has a little bit of stickiness, wet your hands. We're going to go down around the sides here just to kind of lift the dough from the surface. Again, wet hands. We're going to go ahead and stretch and fold. Wet my hands again. And go ahead and stretch and fold. I always do it 4 directions, so stretch and fold to the left, flip it around, and stretch and fold. And already you can see how much smoother this dough is getting. It's getting very smooth and very elastic because of all the strengthening we're doing to it. We're going to go ahead and set the timer again for 30 minutes. So set your cell phones for 30 minutes and we'll come back and do another fold. What? Okay, so last fold. We're going to be, let's take this dough out. Wet the hands. Fold it over from the north. Fold it over from the south. Fold it over to east. And finally fold it over from the west. This dough is getting stronger and stronger as I fold, because I notice it's getting harder and harder to fold it. All right, so this dough is going to go for 30 more minutes to rest, and then we're going to pre-shape. And as we pre-shape, we'll shape it rough at first, shape it rough round, and then we're going to be tightening it up. So by the time we come back in 30 minutes, this dough will have hopefully rested some. It'll be ready for pre-shaping. And we'll let it rest again after pre-shaping and go into shaping. So, but you know, that's what it all comes down to, is patience. The good thing about bread like this is that you can do a little bit at a time, go away, do something else, come back, take care of what needs to be taken care of, and then your actual work time on the bread tends to take hours, but it doesn't mean hours of constant work. It just means work a little bit here, a little bit there. So not bad. We'll be back in 30 minutes. Okay, it's time to work with this dough. This dough has been going now for 2 hours. And it doesn't look like it's changed much, but the reality is that there's a lot of change going on in this dough. In bulk fermentation, there's a lot of enzyme action. There's a lot of the yeast, of course, is growing, and we're getting quite a bit of activity happening in this dough. We're going to go ahead and turn this dough out onto the board. Again, don't pull and stretch on the dough. Try to scrape it out gently. Get everything out of the bowl in one shot so that you don't have to stretch and pull the dough unnecessarily. But we're going to go ahead and get this ready for placing into our final vessel for proofing. What I've got here is I've got a bowl. Okay, I just picked a bowl that I had in my cupboard, and I've got a towel. And I'm going to take this clean towel and I'm going to place it in the bowl. And I'm going to dust it with flour. And this is where the dough is going to proof, is in this lined bowl. So I'm going to put a fair amount of flour in here. I want to make sure it doesn't stick, because this is going to go overnight in the refrigerator, and it's going to proof in this bowl. I'm going to cover it with plastic, and it's going to be there for a long time, so it'll have a chance to soak up quite a bit of flour. Let's put down some flour. Just kind of get flour in around this dough so it's loose from the table. A little bit of flour on my hands, and I'm going to press this dough down gently to get it to spread out. Now we're going to pre-shape this dough. So we're going to go ahead and bring it on into the center, bring it on into the center, bring it on into the center. What we're doing essentially is we're stretching that outer skin of the dough. The idea here is to get that outer skin nice and smooth, and as you can see, it's nice and smooth on the outside. We're going to allow this dough to rest for a moment, and we're going to go ahead and tighten it up again. So when we tighten it up again, we'll pull and bring some more into the center to help get this dough even tighter. We want to have a nice tight skin because we want the gases inside the dough to stay in the dough. And the only way to do that is to get a nice tight skin. So I'm going to kind of bring flour in from around the outside here. We're going to go ahead and cover it up. Give it a moment to rest. Anytime we work with the dough, we like to let it rest for a little bit in between stages. So this is pre-shaped round. And the next step will be to bring it a little tighter and tighten it up even more. And I'll show you. We'll be putting it in the bowl and putting it in the refrigerator overnight. That overnight proof is going to give it about 10 to 12 hours to proof properly. And in the refrigerator, it has a chance to proof for a long time, but slowly, and build really good gases inside the dough, lots of carbon dioxide inside the dough, and really build a beautiful structure inside the crumb of this bread. So let's give it 15 minutes to rest, and we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, so let's shape this dough. This dough has had a chance to rest, and we're going to be putting it into a basket. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen this dough up. We're going to go ahead and, now you can see this dough was fairly tight, and now it's fairly loose and relaxed. We're going to go ahead and bring some to the center. Going to bring another part to the center, bring another part to the center. We're going to keep doing that until we brought everything to the center, because we're making a round loaf. We're making a boule. So there it is from the bottom. We're going to flip it over. This is the pretty side. We're going to have that face up. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to scrub it along the board. I'm going to pull it along the board. Now what I'm doing is I'm pulling from underneath. What that's doing is stretching the dough underneath the opposite side. So as I turn it a little bit and I stretch it, what's happening is that outer skin is getting nice and taut. Now we can use a scraper to do this as well. If we have a scraper or two, we can go underneath our dough. Tightening up that outer skin. As you can see, there's even a bubble right here from where the gases inside are getting pulled tighter and tighter. We're going to go ahead and put this into our basket, I should say bowl. I've got a ceramic bowl here with a towel, and I've floured it pretty heavily, and we're going to put it in upside down. So we're going to put it in seam side up, or bottom side up. So as we do that, as you can see, go ahead and squeeze that seam shut. We're going to place that in the refrigerator overnight. It's going to have a chance to proof. It proofs at 40 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's really going to proof slow. But we're also giving it 10 to 12 hours to proof. So it's going to be fully proofed by the time we bring it out tomorrow. And we're just going to have to bring it out and let it warm up to room temperature before we score it and bake it. We're going to be baking this in a Dutch oven. So as I've given you messages online about that, we're going to go ahead and take a look at either obtaining a Dutch oven or borrowing one from a neighbor, borrowing one from a family member. But you're going to want something to put this in when we bake it. I'll show you my Dutch oven tomorrow when we go to bake this, and in our next video. And mine's a simple cast iron Dutch oven. I bought it on Amazon, but it could be really anything that's a closed container to allow this to bake inside a closed container. So anyway, we're going to put this in the fridge, and I will see you tomorrow. We'll take a look at this when it's done.